Good evening, all of you. On behalf of Professional Development Committee of the Western India Regional Council, the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, I welcome all of you for the today's webinar series for UPSC ICOS preparation for newly qualified cost accountants. Our today's third session, is on emerging concepts in cost and management accounting, life cycle costing, activity-based costing, learning curve and its application, socio-economic costing, target costings, total quality management, environmental management accounting, Six Sigma. Our today's speaker is CMA Milind Date sir. He is a practicing cost accountant. Sir, enriching blend of industry experience of 25 years and 13 years in training and educational sector. Sir, currently associate with ISDC as a director, learning and development. He is an independent director of a US company based in Pune. Over 10,000 hours of training done on vast business and accounting areas such as IFRS strategy, financial and performance management. Also renowned speakers at varied forums and roundtables, seminars and webinars. Also member of Board of Studies and Academic Council of various universities and college all over India. Welcome, sir. Now
Thank
I
you.
request now I request sir to kindly start the session, sir, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for
Thank
the
you, sir.
kind
Thank you.
introduction. And very good evening to all the participants who have joined in so far. Uh, I hope my audio is clear and you can see the
Yes, sir.
screen that I have shared.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. So we discussed about the cost control and cost reduction techniques in my first session held last week. And today we are going to concentrate on some of the emerging concepts in cost management. And these concepts have, of course, they're not very new, but they are in vogue for almost last 3 to 4 decades in various forms. Although all these concepts are emerging and evolving over a period of time, but two things we must keep in mind when we are talking about these emerging concepts today. Number one is these are some of them, of course, are uh, useful, more useful actually in some industries than in the other industries. That's number one. And number two, most of these techniques are based on the use of technology. And in fact, with the help of technology, these concepts have started getting used on a larger scale than what it used to be before. Uh, During the last century, most of these concepts were considered to be theoretical models and more challenging to actually implement, and therefore not uh, used profusely by the industry. But now uh, people have learned to adapt these techniques to the requirements of the organization, and therefore we can see a larger scale application of some of these techniques. So we will talk about the life cycle costing, activity based costing, target costing, learning curve technique, total quality management, Six Sigma, environmental management accounting, and socio-economic benefit analysis today. Of course, I mean, these are too many concepts to be covered at length within the given time, no doubt, because each one I can go on and on and on. But the objective of today's discussion will revolve around how these concepts are to be learned by you people who are willing to take the Indian Cost Accounting Service examination. So, my effort will be to brush up the knowledge of these concepts, which you might have already learned in paper number 15 of your CMA qualification. But at the same time, I will also provide with some of the uh, you know, multiple choice questions with which you can check how far you remember these concepts. Otherwise, you will have to concentrate on revising them once again and make sure that you prepare yourself very well for the examination. Of course, as somebody asked during last time, our study materials, study notes are definitely going to be very useful to you. But what I advise you is also to look at various other resources, especially from the uh, internet, and try and gather more information on that, on these techniques, just to check the practical application part of this. Of course, most of the practical application won't be tested so far as the examination is concerned, but the practical application and understanding thereof will help you to use these techniques in your real life scenarios. So let's look at what these emerging cost management techniques mean to us, and how do we you know see them. Obviously, if you try and compare them with traditional techniques such as what we saw during the last session, these techniques are definitely having wider application compared to the traditional techniques. Traditional techniques, were more or less evolved from the needs and requirements of manufacturing sector. However, the emerging techniques, many of them you would see, are useful for manufacturing, service, even public sector, government sector kind of requirements. And the fundamental difference between traditional and emerging techniques is, you know, whereas the earlier techniques looked mostly uh, at the operational level requirements of the organizations. Whereas these techniques, the ones which we are going to discuss today, look at alignment of the costs with the strategic goals of the organization. So these techniques have no limited use of only improving operational efficiency of the organization, but also help us in terms of achievement of long-term strategic goals of any organization, not necessarily restricted to manufacturing. So, and because they are based on use of technology, and a lot of algorithms have been developed based on these emerging techniques, they do help us in more than one way. So the use of technology helps us in focusing more not on cost itself, but on the factors or influencers or drivers of these costs, which will help us in managing them in much better way. Because apart from the traditional classification of cost into material, labor, overhead, or maybe functional classifications such as manufacturing, admin, selling, etc., natural way of classifying costs, and based on variability, we classify them fixed as variable and variable. But now the emerging techniques make the costs much more visible, because they trace down the costs to numerous cost objects, not only the departments, functions, processes, but more than that, a lot many parameters are actually looked at when you try to understand uh, what are those costs and what drives them, in order for you to take decisions. And these decisions are continuous decisions. It's not a one point in time where you have an information and decide, okay, this should be the price. In fact, pricing in the modern era is a continuous process. You know very well. I mean, we use services like the Ola and Uber cabs, where their pricing keeps on changing throughout the day, depending on the traffic, depending on the availability, depending on the demand. Prices keep fluctuating. Now, our traditional techniques will never help you to take the dynamic pricing decisions. But obviously, emerging techniques where you identify a lot of factors that drive the cost, make the costs visible from your books of accounts, from your cost records, and then be able to trace these costs to various cost objects with a view of taking management decisions. So apart from uh, traditional decision making, these techniques also help us in managing our pricing decisions, which is almost on a continuous basis. I gave you the example of that. Whenever you are launching a new product, you know, traditional techniques such as cost plus profit equal to price actually doesn't work, because uh, the price is market driven. So you may have to assume the price as given by the market and then manage your costs to make a reasonable margin on that. And remember, when you say that you're launching a product, it's not necessarily a completely new product or a service that you launch. But sometimes you may also tweak with its features. Your offering can keep changing again on a continuous basis. So again, you may need to add or remove certain features, like what's done in automobile industry or even a service industry. Where, for example, if you are subscribing to the OTT channels, the offering is different, and for each offering, pricing is different. So we need to understand the cost of operating a channel, which could never be done using our normal traditional methods of costing. Not only it is interesting, my friends, but it's also very, very uh, challenging for us first to understand and then to start thinking where it can be applied. And the new age industries such as hospitality, health services, logistics, supply chain, telecommunications, travel, tourism, entertainment, these are all modern time uh, you know uh, services, and each of these services would require a different approach when you want to look at the costs with respect to your strategic goals. So with this background, my friends, let us look at these 5 6 techniques and just see how they are applicable, how the computations are involved, over what period the computations will keep continuing, and of course, are there any challenges in using them. It's not a very simplistic way in which you can, okay, plug and play these new techniques. No, there's a lot of groundwork that one will have to do. A lot of user buy-in is required, because if things are challenging, people generally resist that change, and we know that very well. Many times we also are part of such resistance. So let me first take you through life cycle costing. Now, everyone knows the different phases in life cycle and the way in which any life cycle would work. But when it comes to uh, studying this technique, we generally talk about only product life cycle, that a product is launched, then market accepts, it grows, then it matures, and then it declines. But this is very limited knowledge and limited application of this technique. You can apply it not only for product life cycle, but also, for example, a customer life cycle. a supplier life cycle, a process life cycle, a patent life cycle, copyright life cycle. This is where you need to use those concepts. Unfortunately, what happens for us is whenever we try to learn from the resources that are available to us, we generally see the description and the explanation linked only to product life cycles. And even the exam sums are based directly on the product life cycles. But please remember, as you start working in the different types of industry, some of which I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you must be able to evaluate whether life cycle concept could be applied and used in all the other uh, types of applications such as supplier, customers, processes, copyrights, patents, so on and so forth. So the approach of life cycle costing is to assess all the costs, whether, as I said, it's a product or a system or a project or whatever, throughout its entire life cycle. Now, the first challenge that people generally could face here is determining or forecasting, estimating the life of the parameter that you want to apply it to, whether it's a product or a process or a project or a system or whatever. What determines its life? Of course, I mean, theoretically, it's beginning, then its growth, then its maturity or stagnation, and then decline. These are standardized models, but you should think in terms of how it is looked at when you're trying to apply it to these different scenarios. Now, naturally, the costs which are incurred over the entire lifetime of a product or a system or a supplier or customer, etc., etc., you need to capture these costs and keep on accumulating them to understand whether the product or the customer has been profitable to you or not over a longer period of time. And I mentioned earlier that these emerging techniques help you understand the longer term strategic perspective. So, costs in traditional techniques, we know we relate it to an accounting period. A record is kept for 1 year or so, but that's only for reporting, that's only for compliance related reporting. In managerial accounting, there is no time breakup. You need to keep compiling the costs almost on a continuous basis to understand its real stature. And therefore, when you want to classify the costs using this technique, you tend to forget about your material, labor, overheads, and such other traditional classification methods. But what you do is have the costs allocated to the various stages of life cycle, such as, of course, planning, designing, developing, developing a prototype, developing a commercially launchable product. If you want to talk in terms of a customer life cycle, you can start in terms of acquiring that customer first. Acquiring means you need to develop the customer, create first the interest about the product or service in his or her mind, then maybe provide some kind of trials and test, like an automobile dealer would give you a test drive. So, or a software developer could say, okay, use this for first 7 days, or even OTT channels. They help you with a 7 day free use offer, and subsequently, if you like, then naturally you can subscribe there too and keep on, uh, you know, uh, using it by making a payment. So all these aspects, operations, maintenance, disposal phase. So, even software providing companies, like, for example, now Microsoft has stopped servicing its older versions of Windows, right? That's called a disposal phase management. And that doesn't come free to us. Disposing a product also is not free for the organizations. You will have to service the products that are already sold in the market. Some of the products may still be in their warranty or additional warranty periods, for which you may have to keep sufficient inventory of parts or sufficient number of uh, people to rectify or attend to the software issues. So, based on this, you need to understand how the costs can be differently classified as such. The goal, therefore, of life cycle technique is definitely to make sure that you get a comprehensive view of the total cost of ownership. For example, when you purchase a car, the cost of the car is not your total cost of ownership. You have to pay insurance, which is an yearly payment. You have to pay taxes. You have to spend a lot of money on operating costs, such as fuel, maintenance, consumables, repairs, the replacement of some parts. And if you say, okay, I'm going to use this car for a period of, let's say, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, what is your total cost of ownership over the period? Now, the cost, see, today in modern era, the uh, cars are sold not necessarily based only on their richness of features, because almost all the cars have those features. But what is sold is the way in which the seller would convince the buyer that in case that car is purchased, the total cost of ownership is the minimum most. So this kind of information will certainly facilitate and sensitize the decision makers to make informed choices. And then, therefore, there are certain costs which you can say, okay, this is an amount which is to be incurred upfront. And then you will need to keep spending money on an ongoing basis throughout the life cycle of that product or a process or whatever parameter you are looking at. So, objective of life cycle costing obviously is to optimize your costs right from the design stage to decline stage. And therefore, what's happened? See, normally in older era, the life cycles of the products or projects used to be very, very long. When for the first time a refrigerator was invented, now the refrigerator technology to change took almost 50, 60 years. Today, every year a new model comes up. The revolution in terms of telecommunication equipment, you can see in last 30, 20, 25 years what has happened. Landlines have almost disappeared from the scenario. So this helps to minimize the time to launch a product, because as it is, if the life cycle is shorter, and if you delay your product launches, by the time you launch your product, the industry life cycle is almost at a maturity level. So you mistime your launching. That's the critical aspect of making use of life cycle costing. And naturally, when you want to reduce your ownership, total cost of ownership, the effort, of course, is to minimize your break even points. Because in a shorter life cycle, you can't have a break even point which is high at all, because otherwise you will never be profitable. Or, of course, if you can, but it's hardly possible, or I could say it's more challenging. But still, if you can elongate or maximize the length of life cycle itself, which is not really possible in today's competitive market. Plus, of course, the rate at which the technology is changing itself. So that's how you should learn application of life cycle costing. Now, if you want to look at some of the stage wise costs, as I said, during the phase of planning and design, you could spend money and huge money, in fact, on R&D. And what happens is we consider that as investment and charge only depreciation over a year's period. Or if they are only research related expenses, then we write it off as and when they are incurred. There are a lot of costs on setup. All these are considered as capital costs. And once you capitalize these costs, they become like invisible. You just forget them, consider them as sunk. But that's not a reality in an economic situation. Accounting wise, you're correct. But what you need to do is to have its effect on the entire life cycle. Launching marketing expenditure, huge expenditure when you launch a product to create market, to create customer awareness, sensitizing them. So a lot of branding related expenses you incur, sales, distribution, growth phase also, very high spend on marketing and promotion. Warranties will now kick in. Post sale service will be there. A lot of expenditure to maintain warranties, etc. During a maturity, things will slow down. But then you still want to be competitive in the market. And what you do is tweak your product features somewhat to sustain your market share. And again, during this phase, of course, warranties and post sale service will continue. As I said earlier, decline phase is also not costless. There are costs of disposing, cost of decommissioning a project, for example, cost of environmental cleanups. You may have to support your product, which is still being used in the market, even in during the post discontinuation phase. So, for that matter, what you need to do is, if you want a better understanding of these costs, you need to identify the implications during each phase of the cycle. Now, I'll illustrate this with two life cycles to you. One is, a product related life cycle. Phases are again same. I mean, introduction, growth, maturity, and then decline. So, what you need to understand is during introductory phase, sales will be lower and the costs per customer will be very high. There'll be initially financial losses. You may have to satisfy the needs of some customers who are innovative for themselves. So there could be some kind of a competition. As you start growing, your market share may go up, so your revenue goes up, cost per customer may come down, cost per unit of product may come down, profits will rise, customer base will increase. And if there are lower barriers to the industry, competition will start kicking in. Maturity or saturation stage, the sales will be at the peak now, and the costs will be at their lowest point. So probably the profitabilities and the cash flows could be very high, and the market as such will be flooded with these products. But the growth will decline. Profits will be there, but the growth will be slowed down. And when the technology starts becoming older or new products start getting introduced, the existing life cycle stage of the existing products life cycle stage would soon fall into a decline phase. Costs will start rising, but sales also will start falling. Profits will therefore be challenging to be maintained. Customers may move from your product to more advanced products. Mm, your competitors also may start leaving the market. So these are the things could happen. Look at this. This is a normal chart given in any book that you study. But a customer life cycle stages are equally important. You know, customer also has a life cycle having phases like awareness, interest, desire, action, loyalty, and advocacy. Company will have to spend money on creating product or service awareness among the customers. So there will be costs of creating awareness. There will be costs related to development of interest and purchasing desire in the minds of customers. There will be definitely certain costs of acquiring and onboarding a customer. Then, yeah, first sell happens to that customer. And then once the customer starts buying from you on a regular basis, there will be transaction costs. But at the same time, you have to make sure that the customer is retained by you. Customer becomes loyal to you. So there are a lot of retention related costs, customer engagement costs. And either because you have decided to discontinue a product or the customer decides to exit from your product use, you will have to manage those exits very well. So the customer life cycle costs are also definitely very crucial for you to understand well. The decision areas are therefore quite logically linked to the life cycle phases. So let's very quickly look at those aspects. In the launch phase, generally, you will have to check whether I can keep high prices, to recoup my high development costs, to ensure that I keep highest returns with me before the customer competitors enter this market. So price scheming, as it is called, possible, not possible, or should I do the reverse way, penetrative pricing? So I'll keep the prices so low that I flood up the entire market with my product only. Customers, competitors find it very difficult to fight me. During growth phase, naturally, because the competition increases, will there be a pressure on the prices? If you want to be still competitive, well, you need to check that. And during the slowdown that companies experience at maturity phase, you need to make sure that you need to fight really very hard to maintain your price levels, to maintain your market share. So this is the time when you could introduce some kind of product upgrades, or you take your product to a new market which you had not serviced as such. So look, different types of decisions are taken in different stages. And as a cost and management accountant, what we need to ensure is we keep collecting the cost information and analyze it for being able to take strategic calls. Now, if I, let's say, want to upgrade the product, what would be the cost of the upgrade? And what are my customers going to pay for that? I need to know that. Let me tell you, therefore, the beauty of these emerging techniques is that it's not necessary that you make use of one technique at a time. No, you may combine more than one techniques and start using it. So that's quite possible. I mean, you can use life cycle costing with TQM or Six Sigma, target costing with, let us say, Six Sigma. It's quite possible. So that's about life cycle costing, and that's about the approach that I highly recommend you should be using. Let's quickly try a couple of multiple choice questions on this. Now, this is the first question. Look at it. and I want to put your answers in, you to put your answers in the chat box. Which of the following statements are true regarding the justification of the use of life cycle costing? Now, the first sentence says that product life cycles are becoming increasingly short, which is true, of course. This means that initial costs are an increasingly important component in the product's overall costs. Is that true? You will have to judge. Second statement says product costs are increasingly weighted to the start of product's life cycle, and to properly understand the profitability of a product, these costs must be matched to the ultimate revenues. So, do you nearly have to give extra weightage to the starting phase costs of a product, and then accordingly understand your profitability over the entire revenue that you generate out of you know the product life? High costs, for example, of research, design, marketing in early stages in products life cycle necessitates high initial price. Necessitates. That means keeping prices at a very high level is like a mandatory thing. That's what the third sentence says. And the fourth says traditional uh, capital budgeting techniques do not attempt to minimize the costs or maximize the revenues over the product life cycle. Traditional capital budgeting techniques, that's the wording used. So it's like the payback period or ROI or II, concepts like that, NPV. These are all traditional capital budgeting techniques. Now, which of these statements are true? Are all of them true, or only a couple of them true, or more than one true? Choices are given. So please type your answers in the chat box. No answers as yet. Jayesh has given his answer. He says option A is the correct answer. Okay, let me check for some other answers. Prashant also says it's mm, option A is correct, and yes, yes, that is the correct answer. Statements 1, 2, and 4 are correct. Statement 3 is not correct because life cycle costing is not just about setting selling prices, and it's not mandatory that you need to keep your prices always high. It doesn't necessitate, as I said. So if you think in terms of using penetrating pricing, well, you could be making a losses in the initial period. So yeah, statement the option A, that statement 1, 2, and 4 are correct, is the correct option to choose. Let's now look at activity-based costing. Again, a concept which you would have certainly learned during your CMA final, an approach which is different than the traditional approach with regard to allocation of overhead costs either to the product or to the service. Now, traditionally, that we use a lot of methods of allocation, apportionment, absorption of overheads using traditional methods. And one characteristics of these traditional methods is, generally we tend to absorb the overheads using a single rate, such as a labor hour rate or a machine hour rate. But then the basis of this allocation apportionment most of the times is really arbitrary. And if it is arbitrary, naturally the costs which we compute also will tend to be arbitrary, and that could lead us to wrong decision making. In a market where competition is not huge, the markets are stable more or less, the demand for your product is not very elastic. In those circumstances, using traditional methods is okay. But in today's dynamic world, it is really impossible for you to use these arbitrary methods of allocation and apportionment. So, therefore, as I said, the approach of emerging techniques is uh, mm, uh, is a focus rather on what drives your costs. And activity-based costing seeks answer to that question: what drives my cost? And once you use the methodology of activity-based costing and successfully implement it, you will definitely get a more accurate and detailed representation of your costs. Again, making them visible, tracing them to the correct methodology, tracing them to the correct cost objects is certainly going to help you a lot. Where especially, it's pretty useful in the industries where overhead cost forms greater proportion, and that is true in all modern, industry. I mean, if you think in terms of service industry, for example, overhead costs are almost 75, 80, sometimes even more than that percentage of the total cost as such. Even in manufacturing industry, the overheads, the direct costs are lesser and lesser, but the overheads have started uh, increasing to high proportions. That means if the cost composition is changing, can we still go on using traditional ways of apportioning and allocating the cost? The answer is no. We need to change our approach, and ABC is one such approach. Of course, the process itself is very, very complicated and complex to understand. I'm not saying to implement, because nowadays you have the liberty of using a lot of computer systems which have inbuilt way of calculating the volumes of drivers. And once you decide the drivers, it is very easy to run the activity based costing within your computer system. But initial identification of drivers, keeping track of volumes of drivers, and then getting people to support this technique and its use, it will be very, very challenging. Basically, what are the steps that we take? You would have already studied these steps, so I'm not going to concentrate a lot on explaining these to you. But yes, I mean, first you identify the activities, all those activities that are necessary to produce a product or render a service. Each of these activity will keep consuming resources, and resources will have costs. So that's what you need to look at. Now, in your paper on strategic management during your CMA final, you would have probably studied the Porter's value chain. Value chain model is nothing but listing company's primary activities and secondary activities. Now, that's what I'm saying. One beauty about these emerging techniques is you can use more than one hand in hand to get the best out of it. So identify activities which are required, and as many as you can identify, better it is for you to get all the costs uh, very closely monitored, because they now become visible, they now become traceable. And then what you do is to allocate your resource cost to each of these activities. All these costs which you could allocate to activities could be again related to any element of the cost. First, create activity cost pools. That is what the concept you might have learned, cost pools. Then identify drivers that cause these cost pool costs to vary. It could be volume of transaction, it could be machine setups, it could be any other, depending, of course, on the type and kind of activities that you have listed. And then what you do is to allocate the activity cost to the products and service based on, of course, the volume of drivers consumed by each of the product or a service. So how do you do it? It's pretty straightforward. I mean, computer systems will make these calculations for you. It is more for you to interpret the computer outputs and then take a call. So you calculate the cost driver rates, total cost pool, uh, monetary value divided by total volume of drivers. That will give you cost driver rate. And then the quantity of the driver that each product or service uses will be multiplied to find out how much overhead you allocate to that product or that service. And then obviously you will be able to get a better estimate of costs and more scientifically allocated overheads there too. It won't be as arbitrary as uh, it was in the traditional way. I'll quickly give you one example of the activity and related cost drivers. For example, if you have marketing costs, machining costs, it could be number of machine hours. Now, you need not use machine hour as a rate for the entire machine shop. No, only machining cost based on machine hours. Component costs would be based on number of components that an activity would use. Setup related costs would be based on number of setups. Packaging costs could be based on the number of customer orders. So a driver is an element that is very closely linked to an activity, which makes it much more scientific than our traditional way of doing it. So obviously there are benefits of activity based costing. Your cost tends to be a much more accurate than what you used to get under traditional methodology, and you get better insights into your activities and the way you could manage them. If you find that certain activities are not adding much value to you, you may just automate them or remove them or re-engineer them. Now, this is where I say a lot of new techniques can be used together with ABC. Pricing definitely improves based on this. But as I said, the initial cost of setting up ABC in an organization is huge. And smaller companies, therefore, may find it a bit difficult to make use of ABC, unless, of course, they're willing to take these costs and absorb them for better future results. Because of the complexities involved, and the kind of work that is initially involved, especially ABC's project is generally registered a lot by the staff. And in some industries, it's really very difficult to, identify and therefore decide the activities and drivers' relationship with each other. Just think of healthcare or a hospital type industry or hospitality industry. Listing of activities itself is a tremendous, humongous job, and that could lead to difficulties. So conceptually, you would have understood everything, but now look at it from the viewpoint of where all it can be applied and how best it can be made use of. But of course, we have to have one eye on our examination of Indian Cost Accounting Service, and here is an MCQ, therefore, based on the activity-based costing. Which of the following statement or statements is or are true regarding activity-based costing? A cost pool is an activity which consumes resources and for which overhead costs are identified and allocated. So you first decide to identify an activity which you call as a cost pool, and that cost pool will keep consuming resources. Resources may be material, labor, or any other resource. And for this cost pool, you will identify and allocate overhead costs. That's the first statement. Second says ABC overhead absorption rate, OAR, is calculated in the same way as absorption costing overhead rate, and will result in the same OAR, overhead absorption rate, being calculated for each cost pool. So they say, fine, I mean, it's the same way in which you used to do under traditional way. Same results ABC will give you. So what is the answer? Statement 1 is correct only, statement 2 is correct only, neither 1 and 2 or both are correct. So please type out your answer in the chat box. And there are a couple of answers already flowing in. Yeah, any more answers? Okay, fine. I mean, let's move on. We don't want to spend a lot of time on this, because that's how you will have to do it in examination. You'll have to very quickly think and put in your answers. Yes, the correct answer is answer A, which means only first statement is correct, second is incorrect. Now, why second is incorrect? Yeah, it is correct that overhead absorption rate is calculated the same way. You take the total cost, you divide by total volume of driver. To that extent, this second statement is correct, but the latter part is incorrect. It will not result in the same overhead absorption rate as you calculate in each cost pool. For every cost pool, overhead rate will be different. So that's why second statement is half correct and half wrong, and therefore fully correct statement, it's only statement number 1, and that's what you will actually write and select option A. Here's one more question on ABC. Which of the following statements are true regarding activity-based costing and cost drivers? So earlier question asked you the correctness only regarding activity-based costing. Now it is asking you regarding activity-based costing and cost driver. So it has to be true for both. Otherwise, you will have to take it as incorrect. So the first cost driver is any factor that causes change in the cost of an activity. A driver is uh, going to cause a change in the activity. That means the driver is going to influence or affect the costs. That's what the first sentence says. For long-term variable overhead costs, the cost driver will be volume of activity. If the overhead cost is long-term variable, the general perception is that the driver will be the volume of activity. Like we said, okay, number of setups is the volume of setups in earlier example. So that's the meaning of sentence number 2. Sentence number 3, traditional absorption costing tends to under allocate overhead cost to low volume products. Under allocation, over allocation is possible if it's a highly produced uh, product. You may over allocate a cost. If you see an under allocation happening, that may be due to low volume products. So which option is correct? A, B, C, D. Statement 1 and 3 correct, statement 2 and 3 correct, statement 1 and 2 correct, or all three statements are correct. So just think and put in your answer. Yeah, some answers have started flowing in. Yeah. Yes, there I could see there are some answers that have flown in. Let us check each statement for its correctness or otherwise. Statement 1, in fact, if you see, has provided exact definition of the term cost driver. So naturally, statement 1 is correct, no doubt about it. Now, if you look at the options, and if you find that statement 1 is correct, that means the answer could be A or C or D. B is ruled out because B says only 2 and 3 are correct. You remember last time I told you the technique about approaching MCQ. This is the way I'm illustrating. So statement 1 is correct because it's the definition of the term cost driver. Driver for long-term variable costs will be volume of a particular driver activity. Naturally, of course, I mean, mm, mm, for a variable cost, why do we call it as a variable? Because it varies with the volume. That's the basic definition of variable cost, correct? So naturally, statement 2 is also correct. So we have now ruled out option A as well. Option A is ruled out, option B is ruled out. So now what's remain? Only C and D. The first two statements are correct. So don't jump and say, okay, statement option C is correct. We have to still examine option 3. So traditional absorption costing, what happens is high volume products definitely will receive a higher amount of overhead costs because you tend to allocate them based on the volume, number of units produced. So higher the number of units, higher will be the overhead cost. Under traditional costing, that's the wording used in the uh, you know of statement that is given. It doesn't talk about absorption, but you have to relate it to absorption costing. That means what? You have to relate that traditional costing would result in under allocation for low volume products as compared to activity based costing. And naturally, therefore, that also is a correct statement. So here, the correct choice would be option D. Each of the option statements are correct. So be careful in reading these statements very, very carefully. And actually, what happens in these type of exams, competitive exams, is there is very little time for you to actually read and understand not only the question line but also the other statements that are made. And only one thing can help you pass these exams, and that's only a lot of question practice. Lot of question practice. So use your workbooks. Definitely they will contain a lot of MCQs. Used RCMA past papers as much as possible, but look for a lot of other resources available from the internet, and that will help you build a lot of confidence about reading them faster and correctly. Not only faster but correctly, and making a choice. These questions are very, very tricky most of the times. Please try and understand that. So that was about ABC. Let me now introduce you to the, or let's say revise the concept of target costing. What it is basically a cost management strategy, which is very highly used when you're developing, especially a new product or a new service. If you look at a lot of you know textbook material about target costing, you'll always find the example of Tata Nano given. Now it's not only Tata Nano. Any new product development you do, any new product you need to price, you have to take a call of what? See, if you look at traditional costing methods, when you determine the cost based on historical cost principle, right? Historical expenses, you collect all that, and then price is set to cover these costs plus your margin, desired profit margin. But as I said, how many companies have the liberty of charging the price that they want, especially in consumer market? Well, if it's a suppliers market, if it's a monopoly, well, then the companies have liberty of charging any price which they want. But in a very highly competitive market of modern days, the price is generally decided by the market, and customers will say, hey, I'm ready to pay only this much for this kind of a product or this kind of a service. I'm not ready to pay more than that. And that's how you see the prices always keep falling in modern market. Why? Because it's not decided by the companies themselves. It's also there's also enough pressure created in the market by customers. Because if you keep charging high price, customers will switch you for your competitors. Or just because you want to charge a high price, customers may not be ready unless you are a brand like Apple. or a Samsung. You can't compare the mobile prices of these two products with the other products. If other brands keep charging prices like what these two brands charge, they will be out of market pretty soon. And therefore, targeting your cost is the only alternative. So, what is in your control? For example, price is not in your control because the market decides it. The margin is given to you by maybe your board of directors or by investors, shareholders who have invested in your organization. So they say, hey, we would like to have these kind of returns. So as a management, these two variables are out of your control, price and margins. So what you do is take the price which is given to you minus the margin which is also given to you. The remainder is your cost within which you must produce and sell a product. So that's the way. Control the controllable, and the only controllable thing is cost, so to say. Of course, it's not very easy always to control and reduce your cost, and I have illustrated that to you during session one. Definitely, I mean session two, my first session, although it was session number two. So keep that in mind. So this approach is a sort of a proactive approach, which starts by determining the profit margin given to you by shareholders or the board, and then set up a target cost to make sure that you can sell your product in the competitive market at a price which is dictated by the market. And while doing that, you still are able to achieve your uh, desired profits. So where can you use this target costing? Generally, in the markets where competition is really intense, customers in these markets are very sensitive to product prices. They will quickly keep switching, and they have a lot of substitutes available in the market. Take automotive sector, electronic products, consumer goods. Rapid technological advancements and fierce competition, these are the two reasons which will make it mandatory for the companies to focus on cost efficiency and operate within what is called as the target cost. Of course, whether the companies are able to achieve those targeted costs or not is a different ball game altogether, and they will have to make sure that the continued efforts are taken to manage the costs within the target limits. So, what is the process of target costing? Naturally, you first analyze the market in which you want to introduce your product, market conditions, uh, whether it's a monopoly or oligopoly or intense competition. What are the customer needs, their preferences, their likings? Are there a lot many competitors already in the industry before you introduce your product? Are you going to disrupt the existing market by introducing a totally innovative product? And of course, a judgmental call will have to be taken. Of course, nobody will come and tell you, okay, this is the price that the market is ready to accept. No, you have to take a judgmental call based on the data that you collect, the price that customers are willing to pay for the various features as well as the quality of the product. Of course, you can do this. One technique that you can use is test market your product. I mean, select 100 or 200 or 500, 1000 customers, give them your product to use and ask them this question, okay, how much do you think the product can fetch in the market? So that's one of the techniques, test market. Do all these analysis as a first step, and then set what we call as a target selling price for your product. The price that would align with the customer's expectations. And uh, could be one thing could be done. I mean, you could check the prices of similar products in the market. Now, let's say you are coming up with an OTT channel, a new OTT channel. There is already a reference point for you. How much generally the OTT providers charge? Maybe just 1 rupee per day or 1.2 rupees per day, 2 rupees per day, so on and so forth. So you can't come with your set of channels and say, hey, I will charge you 5 rupees per day. Nobody will pay you. So while setting a target selling price, you need to be judgmental, ensure that you don't deviate too much from what the customers demand, and still be able to provide same features, same quality, and then same level of service to the customers. And then, considering this range of services that you want to uh, provide to the customers, you may determine the desired profit margin. Now, how do you determine that? Obviously, what is the average industry margin? You can collect data for that. Plus, of course, what's your company's strategy? That also can be collected by you, and then decide profit margin. It could be in terms of an ROI. You may say, hey, I'm going to invest so much money in this particular product, and I want a 15% or a 10% return on this. So that gives you a total volume of product, total volume of profit. And you can say, okay, over the lifetime, I'm going to sell, estimated, of course, these many units. Based on that, you can calculate profit per unit. So target selling price minus uh, profit per unit, desired profit per unit, that will provide you with target cost per unit. So this is, I'm sure, what you would have studied during your CMA final. But generally, people stop at this stage and say, hey, this is really pretty straightforward and simple. The actual word starts here. You know, in that nano example that I referred to, the market gave the price of 1 lakh of rupees in those days. Tata say, hey, we have to have a 10% margins. So it was 90,000 rupees that was the target cost. Question was it possible to produce a car at such a low price? When the initial estimates were taken, the cost came to somewhere close to 2 lakhs of rupees. So therefore, the next step is necessary, and that's called identify the cost gap. If your forecast cost is 2 lakhs of rupees and the market has given you a target cost of 90,000 rupees, you are way above the target cost. So what do you need to do? Reduce your forecast costs. Not on a A4 size paper, but by doing a lot of work, close the gap. Especially if the gap is negative, that means if the forecast cost is higher than the target cost, you have to close out that uh, gap. And for closing out that gap, naturally, you will have to use a lot of uh, cost reduction techniques. You have to ask a lot of questions to yourself, which will create probabilities of reducing cost on many uh, aspects. You could say, hey, can any material be eliminated? Can I cut down on, let's say, packing material? I'm spending too much on packing. Is it really required? Can I use substitute material, which could be cheaper, but still be able to maintain quality? Can I bring in savings in my labor cost without, of course, again compromising quality? But I could use low skilled people. Is it possible? Can I improve productivity by improving the motivation of people that work with me? Can the production volume be increased? to achieve economies of scale, better negotiations, bring down my costs? Can I have a look at my supply chain and see I can select the vendors based on the parameters that could bring some costs down for myself? Can the part assembled components be bought in instead of making it inside to save on the cost? Can I reduce the incidence of cost drivers? So all these types of different questions you could ask, and then probably you may not be able to close out the complete gap, but could at least go very close there too. So this is in all the process of target costing. Let us quickly see an MCQ on that. In target costing, which of the following would be an appropriate strategy to reduce a cost gap for a product that existed in a competitive industry with demanding shareholders? So see how many different conditions are given. What do you want to do? You want to reduce a cost gap. And I have discussed it a lot in last 5 minutes or so. So strategy to reduce cost gap for a particular product. Now, where the product was getting sold, competitive industry, but at the same time, shareholders are also demanding. So there are 4 strategies listed. First is increase selling price. Can you increase selling price in a highly competitive industry? Shareholders will love it because that will boost their profit. But can you increase the selling price in a competitive industry? Second statement, reduce the expectation gap by reducing selling price. So first said, increase the selling price. Second says, okay, you reduce selling price, but tell the customers that you won't get all the features with that reduced price. Is that possible in a competitive industry? Reduce the desired margin on the product. If shareholders are demanding, can you reduce the desired margin? Fourth strategy, automating production in order to reduce average production cost. Is this within your control? Can you do this in a competitive industry and with demanding shareholders? Look at these 4 statements and just select a choice. Put your answer in the chat box, please. Yes, one answer has come. Second has come. Third has come. Yes, I mean, the answer is correct. The correct answer is D. And this is how you need to think out. If you don't read the question statement correctly, it will be very difficult for you to answer. Option D is correct because, as I said, in a competitive industry, you can't increase price. You can't reduce expectation gap by reducing the selling price, and the customers will not accept your product. You can't reduce margin because shareholders are demanding. The only thing which is in your control and that will lead to reduction in cost gap is automate your production, get economies of scale, reduce average production cost. So therefore, correct answer is option D. Let's try one more quick question. Now, in the last session as well as in this session, I have deliberately not put a question which tests your numerical ability, but here is one small one which will test your numerical ability. I know most of the students love when a question contains numbers. Selling price of product Sigma is set to be 250 rupees per unit. Sales for coming year are expected to be 500 units. Company requires a return of 15% in the coming year on its investment of 250,000 in product Sigma. So what Which of the following is the correct, of course, correct target cost per unit of Sigma? Simple calculation will help you do that. Target cost, as you know, is nothing but target selling price minus target margin, both per unit. Just do the calculations and let me know. Yes, I mean, this is a straightforward question, so shouldn't take much time as well as any difficulty also. So yes, the correct answer is answer C, option C. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. Thank you. So yes, I mean, the total investment 250,000, 15% return thereon. That means total yearly return will be 37,500. We are going to produce 500 units. So profit per unit expected will be 37,500 divided by 500, which is 75. So profit per unit expected is 75. Expected selling price is 250. So target cost will be 250 minus 75, which is 175. Pretty straightforward and simple. So that was target costing, my friends. Let's now look at concept of learning curve. Now, this is a concept which is although called an emerging concept, but highly unlikely finding its way through uh, the role of a management accountant, because the industry has suddenly changed upside down in last 20 odd years. This concept was introduced for the first time in the last couple of decades of the last century, where the degree of automation was not very high. But given the degree of automation in the industry today and lesser and lesser use of manual operators, the concept of learning curve actually, is not very widely useful in most of the industries. Application is certainly definitely limited. Nevertheless, being in the syllabus, we need to look at it. So what it is, it illustrates how experience of a person can lead to increased efficiency and cost savings for a company. Naturally, as a concept is easy to understand. If you're doing something for the first time, you know, you will take longer time to do an activity. But as you keep on doing activity and become extensive uh, executor of that activity, with experience, you will tend to take lower and lower time. And naturally, when time taken by the workforce is lower, the cost should reduce. That's a simple logic behind this concept. So it does illustrate that repetitive experience will lead to increase in efficiency and reduction in cost. But of course, this cannot keep on happening endlessly. The cost cannot become zero. Beyond a point, just because you are experienced, you can't do any activity in zero time. So obviously, a learning index will stop somewhere. It will stop somewhere. So if individual repeats a task and tend to be more efficient, leading to a reduction in the average time taken. But this concept, as I said, is useful only and only if the industry in which this concept is being used is highly labor intensive, which with repetitive tasks being carried out manually. If it is carried out by machines, there is no question of learning curve. The question of learning, although we are talking about machine learning today, it doesn't happen that with increased experience, the machine starts doing the work faster. No, it doesn't happen that. So a learning curve index represents a rate of learning leading to improvement in efficiency. For example, if learning curve index is 0.8, it denotes that there is an 80% learning curve. And if the learning curve is 80%, learning index is 80%, that indirectly tells you there is a 20% reduction in the cost. And it has been empirically found, it's not mathematically proven, but empirically found, and that's the biggest assumption on which this concept works, is that with doubling of the output, the cost goes on reducing at 1 minus the learning curve. So if you are if you produce one unit, for example, for which you take 100 hours, and if the learning curve is 80%, second unit should take you 20% lesser time. So it will be 80 hours, not 100 hours. So what has happened? Output earlier was 1, now it is 2, doubled the output. So average cumulative time taken will reduce. First unit took 100, second unit took 80, total hours 180, total production 2. So average cumulative time is 90 per unit. That's how the concept used to work. But as I said, it's very difficult to apply this concept in a very useful manner nowadays because of very high level of automation. Mathematically put, of course, average time taken per unit will be nothing but time taken for the multiplied by total number of units produced raised to learning curve index. Could be 80%, could be 90%, could be 95%, whatever. One conceptual clarity you must have: higher the learning rate, lower will be the cost reduction. That means if your learning rate is 95%, there will be only 5% cost reduction with every doubling of output. But as I have illustrated to you, if the learning rate is 80%, it will lead to 20% reduction in time and therefore cost on every doubling of output. That's what you need to learn very carefully. So it reflects a doubling effect, as I said. 90% learning curve would mean that each time cumulative output doubles, the average time taken per unit will fall to 90% of the previous value. So if the first unit takes 2 hours and you double the output, that means you produce 2 now. The second unit will take 90% of 2 hours, which is 1.8 hours. That's how it keeps on getting calculated every time you keep on doubling your output. largely a theoretical model based on a lot of assumptions. With automation and technology, this concept is losing its shine, no doubt. So let's directly jump on to an MCQ for this. Learning curve theory is based on the idea that maximum efficiency can be achieved in the beginning. Maximum efficiency cannot be achieved in the beginning. Maximum efficiency cannot be achieved. And last is none of the above. So think and tell me what you think is the correct answer. One answer has flown in. Two, three, four. Yeah, people are quick in answer. What simple question? Yes, the correct answer is B. Maximum efficiency cannot be achieved in the beginning. The reason is, of course, you are not experienced. As you go on doubling the output, then only the efficiency starts kicking in. And at the maximum, the efficiency can keep going up till the learning curve stops. So it can never be achieved in the beginning. Okay, so that's the correct choice. The second question on this is, again, I'm trying a numerical one for you. Just look at it. If the direct labor time is reduced by 20% with every doubling of output, what will be the time taken for 16th unit produced as an approximate percentage of cost of first unit produced? So please understand this carefully. Every time you double the output, labor time will reduce by 20%. So you know what is the learning curve. If the cost reduction is 20%, learning curve will be 1 minus 0.2. So that is 80%. You have to keep doubling the output till you reach 16. So just make the quick calculations and let me know what's your answer. Yeah, one answer has flown in. Well, let me put it. The first unit will always take 100% of the time, no reduction. Once you double the output, that means 2 units, the second unit will take 80% because 20% time reduction. So 80% of 100, which is 80. You double the output from fourth, second you go to fourth. Now 80% of 80, which is 64. You double it from 4 to 8, 80% of 64, which is 51.20. You double it from 8 to 16. Now 80% of the previous, which is 51.2. So 80% of 51.2 is 40.96. So yes, the correct answer is option B. So as I said, I mean, if you're lucky enough, you get a question like this in the MCQs on learning curve in the examination, well, these are the marks which you should never lose. But in real life scenario, it is very hard to apply these concepts as compared to the other emerging cost techniques we discussed so far. Now, let me take you through environmental cost management. And with the focus of the modern world on ESG, environmental, social, and governance, I think environmental cost and sustainability related efforts that organizations are taking uh, assumes a lot of importance in the modern day. Basically, the effort is again making your costs visible and your ability to trace them to environment related or environmental driven kind of costs. So you identified the activities which affect environment or which are affected by environment and creates certain impact on the organization. And therefore, what you need to do is to estimate all the environment related activities that you perform and naturally the cost thereof. You have to separately monitor the use and the cost of resources. Which are those environmental related resources? Of course, air, water, electricity, fuel, so on and so forth. And then ensure that environmental considerations are embedded in your capital investment decisions, in your operating decisions, in your management methodology, management systems everywhere. And generally, again, in traditional cost classifications, material, labor, overhead, we can't identify directly whether a cost is related to environment or not. And therefore, you won't be able to report on that also. Here, you have to make an effort to, you know, uh, bring in that traceability or visibility to the environment related and environment affecting costs. So, because the consequence of all these activities and costs is obviously going to give rise to certain environment related risks, and that could affect the reputation of an organization. So, you need to assess the likelihood of the environmental risks materializing, probability, and if the probability actual occurs, what would be the impact that it creates? British Petroleum was faced with, for example, the oil spill, and they had to, clean up the sea water to a large extent, of course, and spend a lot of money on the costs to maintain or bring back the environment to the normal. If these costs are not separately visible, then you can't control. Last time I told you one thing: if you cannot measure, you cannot control. And you can measure only if you, uh, you know, can make the cost visible, can trace them, trace back to them. Of course, I mean, environment related activities today, every company is doing. You can benchmark yourself, your organization with probably others or the world's best practices. And there's a lot of data that is available today on this. So basically, there are different ways of uh, identifying environment costs. You can have a choice of you using any of them, of course. I mean, there are companies which keep it simple: internal environmental costs, external environmental costs. Internal cost examples I have given: improving system to avoid penalties. Like, for example, if there is a water pollution that you are causing, you set up a system to treat wastewater. It's to avoid penalties and fines. You dispose your wastage in a particular manner, again to comply with the law. So wastage disposal costs. If you have unfortunately sold products that have faults therein, which could cause environmental hazards, For example, it could cause excessive carbon emissions. You take back the products and rectify them. External environmental costs could be like carbon emission cost itself, the generation of carbon, the usage of energy, water, social welfare costs, because if you're affecting the living uh, mm, of people in a certain area and you have to take steps, these are all external costs. The way in which you can classify these costs is, the prevention costs, detection costs, internal failure, and external failure. Prevention could lead to uh, designing of processes to reduce wastage. For example, you have CO2 filters, insulated materials, recycling of the waste. So design processes for that. It's trying to prevent negative effects on the environment. That's why called as preventive cost. Still, if you keep producing something which affects environment, detection cost, you test the discharge water for contamination. So there will be testing cost, inspection cost. These are like with the objective of detecting whether I have done anything wrong to the environment. Internal failure is obviously creation of waste material, creation of toxics. Howsoever you may reduce, some amount of waste will get generated. Some amount of toxic material may get discharged. And external failure cost will be like, okay, if you cause some hazard, you will have to clean up. I gave you the example of British Petroleum. So cleaning of contaminated soil, contaminated water, oil spills, that's the way you need to classify your environment related cost and then collect them by documentation. So what are the techniques that companies generally use for uh, environmental management accounting? The first technique is input output. So companies keep records of material flow because most of the waste gets generated when you transform material. So material keeps flowing from one stage to the other till a finished product is produced. So it's simple based on the logic. A material comes in, it goes out, but in another form. So what comes in must go out. So if 100 kg has come in, you must be able to account for entire 100 kg. And as much as goes out in desired form, you will cause less harm to the environment. Input output analysis. Next technique that is used is flow cost accounting. The first method uses only flow of material, but second is expanded method that takes into account the flow of material, and in addition to that, system, all the processes, all the activities, not necessarily related only to material. And then finally, delivery and disposal of the waste that gets created. It could be waste of material, it could be waste of machine time, wastage of human time, wastage of energy, whatever. But the best way of generally thought about of using is use this environmental management accounting by mixing it with activity based costing. So you classify environment related costs and environment driven costs and find out their drivers. Environment related costs are, for example, voluntarily incurred for management of environment by the companies, like pollution control. I gave you the example, waste management, or introduction of environment management services like ISO 14001. Companies may invest into eco-friendly technologies or renewable energy projects are taken up. Whereas on the other hand, environment driven costs are always those which are uh, triggered or influenced by external factors, such as laws and statutes, regulations, compliances related that. So generally these three methods are used. Additional methods may emerge in future, no doubt about it. So of course, I mean, you, as I said, you can use it along with activity-based costing. You could also use it with life cycle costing. So I am not going to concentrate only on current year's environmental consequences, but a full life year uh, environmental consequences that a certain product or a certain process is going to generate. So it's like a cradle to grave approach. Let us look at an MCQ on this. Which two of the activities are environmental prevention costs? So first is fitting of carbon filters to reduce carbon emissions. Is this activity going to prevent environmental cost? Water purification treatment to clean wastewater before it leaves factory. Capturing recycling of exhaust gases to generate energy. Insulation of heating pipes to reduce heat loss. And last is fitting air quality monitors to identify levels of emissions. Now, see, the first, you fit something, you introduce a system to reduce emission. The effort is directed towards preventing carbon emission. It's a preventive cost. Water purification treatment to clean wastewater. You're going to clean wastewater. That means you have already created wastewater. So this is not prevention. This is rectification. So B is not a prevention cost. C, capturing recycling of exhaust gases. That means you all have already generated exhaust gases. It's different that you are capturing them and try and generate energy from it, but you have already created those gases. So this is not prevention. This is again correction. You insulate heating pipes to reduce heat loss. You want to have a system where heat loss that causes environmental cost is tried to be prevented. So this is a prevention cost. Fitting air quality monitors to identify, the purpose is only to identify levels of emissions. So emissions are going to happen, but you want to identify and determine how much. So these are like detection costs. So only A and D are prevention. There is a more comprehensive example over here. Of course, I suggest you to take just take a pick of this and then try and classify them into prevention, detection, internal failure and external failure according to your own convenience. You know, because I'm sending these files separately to you. Like last time, also I have shared my file with WRC. You can ask them to give you that. But this is the best way to learn. You know, you will be in a position to quickly answer the questions over here. So I'm not going to discuss each and every of these 8 statements. Just a couple of them, I will tell you how to look at it. For example, if you take the second statement, B, water purification treatment to clean wastewater before it leaves the factory. That means first you have created wastewater. So it's not prevention. You are not going to measure how much wastewater you have uh, you know created, so it's neither detection, it's a rectification, because you have failed to keep wastewater to zero. So you introduce water purification, but you make sure that the water is clean before it leaves factory. So it's internalized measure, internal failure cost. You know, take statement E, payment of fines for breaching environmental regulations. That means you have not bothered about the environmental consequences. You have not bothered to prevent them, nor bothered to, have systems of detecting it at an early stage. Neither you have made any efforts to rectify the scenario, and therefore the law has charged fines, external failure cost. This is how you should be logical and then answer these type of questions. Of course, this is not a multiple choice. This is more to check our understanding of the way we classify environmental costs. Very, very useful this. I'll now take you to a concept called as Six Sigma. uh, Motorola, a telecommunications company, mobile phone making company, a technique was introduced in last century, during 1980s, Six Sigma, a managerial technique which would try to prevent defects, try to improve process, ensure that the goods are produced or services are supplied at the highest quality. Sigma is, of course, a statistical symbol denoting a standard deviation. So you will not deviate from the design that you have made. Maximum permitted errors will not go beyond 6 standard deviations away from mean. Ultimate goal, of course, is to ensure that defects per million opportunities does not exceed 3.4, which guarantees 99.99 and more percentage of accuracy. So it aims to improve your process through an approach which is like DMAC approach, as they call it, or DMADV approach. DMAC stands, of course, for defining a process, measuring up how far you have deviated, analyzing the causes. I stands for improvement, and then control, whether the revised process is really getting controlled or not, or really getting really working on, or uh, this is general for process improvement, but you could use another technique for new product or new process that you have met with zero defect kind of a target. DMADV. D again stands for defining the new product, new process. M stands for measuring it. A for analyzing it. You know, D second is for designing the product then, and then verify whether it conforms to the defined standards or not. Basic aim, of course, is preventing errors, preventing wastage throughout the organization. And it has the characteristics of keeping customer in the focus always, seeking continuous improvement, employee involvement, commitment of the top leadership, vendor selection, who also have similar systems set up in their organizations, and a continuous training and education to your employees. Hardly likely to be tested in depth in the examination, but at least we should get introduced to this, we should know this. Which of the following is a common goal of Six Sigma project? Reduce process cycle time, improve customer service, increase revenue, all of the above. Of course, I mean, whenever an improvement is thought about, it will result in increasing revenue. So the correct answer here is, of course, D, all of the above. Another question, which of the following is an example of non-value added activity? Is designing a product non-value added? Testing a product non-value added? Repairing a defective piece non-value added? Or all these activities are non-value adding? Just type your answer here. Yes, if you're designing a product is going to be designed to add value. If you're testing a product, obviously tests will add value to a product because it will help you identify whether the product conforms to the design, it conforms to the features that are promised, is it really working. Repairing a defective product, are you supposed to produce a defective product? No. So if you're spending money on the repairing and you tell customer, hey, this was a defective product, we have refurbished, but you pay me the same price, will it add value to customer? No, it will not add value to customer, neither to you. So the only non-value added activity in this choice, this sum is C. This is non-value adding activity. I'll quickly now introduce you to the last concept, or last couple of concepts rather, TQM, total quality management. Goods are produced, services are supplied, must conform with highest quantity. TQM, we all know ISO certification that has come out of the concept of TQM. The effort is to prevent errors, prevent wastage throughout the organization. Again, same focus as Six Sigma, no change therein. And nowadays, with a lot of focus on ESG, as I said, environmental part we discussed, there is a lot to have on socio-economic, which are interrelated concepts. You do a lot of social economic analysis and costing. What does it entail? It includes assessment of social as well as economic impact of projects which an organization carries out, its policies or programs. Any type of organization, private sector, public sector, government sector, even NGOs, they will create some socio-economic impact. So it does definitely always go beyond financial analytics and considers broader factors of societal, environmental impacts, impact even on things like wealth distribution is also taken into account. So far as the reference to costing is concerned, it's nothing but assess all the social costs and benefits, both financial as well as non-monetary. It's a huge field, and it's very difficult to set an MCQ type question and on this as well as the last one, and therefore I have not included deliberately any questions on that. So this is all about the emerging trends in strategic cost management. That's it from my side. Thank you for being with me. If you have questions, I'm ready to take. Otherwise, I declare this as over and I can hand over to WRC.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
I will
Sir,
share the file like the last one. Please
yes, sir.
distribute it to the candidates who attended.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
sir. There is no other questions, sir. Then we
Yeah.
will conclude the
Okay.
session, sir.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the wonderful
Thank you.
session, sir.
And good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good night, sir. Thank you.